Hello, I'm Brian Wilson. Today, 4 countries of the Permanent Five will discuss whether there should be a mandated intervention in case of a genocide. Here we have the heads of the Security Council. This is Li Baodong of the People's Republic of China, Susan Rice of the United States of America, Gerard Arad of France, Sir Mark Lyle Grant of the United Kingdom. I'd like to start off this discussion by asking each representative, what is your country's foreign policy? Li?
Our main purpose is to maintain peace in our country. We do not want to get involved in other countries' affairs because we want to keep peace in our nation. The most important thing to us is to follow our 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, which are to keep mutual respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, maintain mutual non-aggression with other countries, to not interfere with other countries' affairs, and to keep equality and mutual benefit with other countries. And lastly, to peacefully coexist. The Chinese government and our people also believe in the new security concept and peaceful rise and peaceful cooperation. The new security concept puts emphasis on mutually benefiting economically with other nations. Our peaceful rise and peaceful cooperation concept is to reassure peace in the world, particularly in neighboring countries.
Sir Grant.
Our country has been debating this topic for many years. Recently, after the Cold War, the UK proclaimed a determination to prevent against genocide, even passing a law stating genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, torture, and hostage-taking are criminal offenses of a particular egregious nature, which require the extension of the domestic court's normal jurisdiction to ensure that perpetrators are brought to justice.
And Susan?
We have traditionally followed realist power politic thinking, where national interests always overrule humanitarian ones. We have the capability and power, therefore we have the moral obligation to intervene in certain cases, even when national interests are not at stake. We are a democratic state that has respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, and commitment to addressing global challenges and strengthening and building alliances. With our support, the General Assembly branded genocide a crime under international law and called for the adoption of an international treaty on the subject that was called the Genocide Convention. We reacted and became involved when Germany became too powerful and ended the war in Iraq and had begun to wind down the war in Afghanistan.
And Gerard?
France has no set policies on genocide, but through our history we have gotten involved in 2 genocides, both Syria and Rwanda. In both, we've gotten in trouble and blamed for assisting the wrong side, which we are apologetic for. But for this, we believe that we do not have any responsibility to get involved with genocide, because unless another country needs our assistance, or unless that country is directly involved with us, or the genocide is happening within our country, it is not our responsibility. We will be glad to help if they promise to return the resources after the genocide is over.
How did your country handle past genocides? For example, the Rwandan genocide.
There's a lot to be said about how France handled the genocide. The national news said the French were the most powerful foreign ally of the regime that carried out the bloodbath, yet instead of disabusing extremist ethnic Hutus of their fear about minority ethnic Tutsis, it reinforced them. More troubling still, agents with at least unofficial links to France funneled arms to some perpetrators of the massacres even while they were underway. Finally, in the verdict of the late Rwanda expert Alison de Bourgois, the French were in a position to save Tutsis and others at risk with relatively little difficulty, and yet they chose to save very few.
Our country in Great Britain, we sort of stayed out of the war. Or the genocide. Although we originally supported Belgium, who had called to withdraw foreign nationals, that was really our only role. We went to Rwanda, we got our troops out, and then we sort of just left it alone. We knew only to a certain extent what was going on in Rwanda, and I think that's one of the biggest problems with the United Nations, is that this genocide only lasted 100 days, and during that time it was still a debated topic whether or not it could even be considered a genocide. So we weren't sure whether or not it was worth losing innocent United Kingdom lives to defend these Tutsis.
Are you saying that a United Kingdom life is more important than that of a Rwandan?
Well, for me as a partial ruler of the United Kingdom, it is my duty to protect my people in the United Kingdom and to not get involved in a genocide that could have caused thousands and thousands of UK lives to be killed when we could have just, as we did, leave this genocide alone and let them figure it out themselves.
And Lee?
We actually supplied the government and Hutus with arms. We did this because one of the main purposes in our country at the time was to restore China's prestige and stature as a great power in the world. If we supplied the government, we could receive power in exchange. However, we do regret that we gave the Hutus most of their power to kill the Tutsis.
So your power is more important than the lives being lost?
We do regret doing so, and that's why we are trying to restore peace in the world and in our country by enforcing the policies I spoke about before, like the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence.
We are just trying to ensure that our country's economy is stable and that we are still powerful, and that's just as important.
But we are all heads of the Security Council of the United Nations. Article 24 of the United Nations Charter states that in order to ensure prompt and effective action by the UN, its members confer on the Security Council's primary responsibility is to maintain national and international peace. This means that by becoming a part of the United Nations, it is each individual's country's duty to ensure that peace is being maintained.
Yes, you're right, and that's why we're trying to have beneficial relationships with other countries and not just focusing on ourselves.
America responded to the worsening crisis by voting unanimously to abandon Rwanda and leave only about 200 soldiers for the entire country. We evacuated our own personnel, but made no effort to evacuate any of the Tutsis and left them there in Rwanda. The killings were refrained from being labeled as a genocide, so there was no emergency intervention that was necessary. The Secretary Council also failed to establish any timetable, so troops were never sent in time to stop the massacre. The initial plan of our country was to wipe out any Rwandan Patriotic Front ally or potential ally, and thus raise the costs and limit the possibility of a Tutsi takeover. U.S. officials confined themselves to a public statement, diplomatic demarches, initiatives for a ceasefire, and attempts to contact both the interim government perpetrating and killing the Rwandan Patriotic Front. We did launch substantial operations to assist humanitarian efforts to those displaced by the genocide, but we did not stay there to evacuate them.
I think we can all agree that in the case of the Rwandan genocide, enough action was not taken. These Tutsis were being, like around 800,000 of them were killed, innocent children, women, men, even foreign nationals who had no part in this genocide.
However, we had no alliance to Rwanda, nor did we have any requests for help from them, and we were not notified that it was a real genocide until too far in for us to actually assist them.
But even then, it's not, you can still assist them in some way. Even countries like China that have no ties to Rwanda, it's not impacting your country very much by just assisting them in any way and not allowing these hundreds of thousands of lives and murders to occur, and then your country is just completely passive toward it.
But I think that we're looking at it from two different opinions, because Susan and I, coming from the UK and the United States, constantly, we're the ones who have the responsibility to go in and help these countries just because of how we've established ourselves as world powers. Whereas, like, your country do not have these responsibilities. And so it's not fair for every single genocide, every single war that goes on for the United States and the United Kingdom and countries similar to us to have to go in and intervene.
But we are not asking you to.
And the obligation is for the UN to maintain international peace and not to just sit there and allow these conflicts to occur.
Going off on that, how should future genocides be handled?
Well, since we are a world power and whenever a conflict arises, since we are the ones that are expected to become involved, we want a set standard which mandates involvement so other countries are aware of when they should become involved. And it's not just like the US or Great Britain or other world powers to be the ones that the other countries all depend on, because it does leave our countries in debt. Even though we do have many resources, it is still greatly impacting our economy.
Well, I think it should be a country's individual decision whether or not they want to send people to suffer genocide. Each country should have absolute freedom on what they should do with their army.
But the whole point of the United Nations is to maintain peace. And if you are just going to get the rewards of being in the United Nations, but not withhold that, which is one of the #1 goals of the United Nations, then why is that allowed? Why are you allowed to just not intervene at all, whereas the United States and Great Britain and other countries like that are withholding this standard and getting more in debt and losing more lives? There has to be some sort of standard. We have to establish something that says, when do you need to intervene, when do you not intervene?
And it depends on what is happening, where it is happening, who can help and how. It's all about the individual situation. We do not get involved because that is not our obligation, because the people do not expect that from us.
But it is your obligation as being part of the United Nations.
But if we don't have the resources to assist it or assist it in the way that you guys do, like I assisted it by giving arms to the rebels in Syria, and that is frowned upon, but I was assisting the genocide in a different way.
True, and I think, I'm not saying that we need to get involved in every single genocide that occurs, because then every country, it would be the Third World War, every country would be in a conflict. But I think that we can't just have another Rwandan genocide. We have what's going on in Syria, there's what's going on in Afghanistan with the United States and even with the UK. There needs to be some sort of mandate from the UN that says, for instance, if the group that is being attacked, in this case the Tutsis, has no form of any sort of military or any arms to protect them, then they are able to call upon the UN to ask for, say, they call upon France to come in, and then the United Nations, you don't have to send all your resources, obviously, but someone needs to help them. There has to be some people who are going in to help these so that lives aren't being lost.
And a lot of genocides involves morals.
I
And it's
agree.
hard to establish what each country, what each individual's morals are.
Yeah, I agree, because we talk about the Holocaust, we talk about the Rwandan genocide, the Armenian genocide. These were groups of people who, for religious reasons, for racial reasons, or just for different political reasons, were being targeted. And they had no form of support, they had nothing to protect themselves, in which case we do need to get involved. And I don't think that every single time it should be the responsibility of the United States or the United Kingdom to have to go and get involved. And that's why the UN should have this set law that says, if, say, over 100,000 people are killed and they don't have any army, then China has to go in, or then the United States has to go in, then Russia has to go in.
And if one of the countries of the United Nations has the ability to go and help, they should.
That is all the time that we have for today's discussion. We thank each representative for coming.